The wind howled across the plains of Wyoming Territory in 1875, carrying the sharp smell of sage and the distant promise of rain. Winifred Lawson clutched her worn leather journal to her chest as she stepped off the stagecoach, her simple calico dress billowing around her ankles. Copper Creek wasn't much just a dusty main street lined with wooden storefronts, a church spire rising defiantly against the vast emptiness of the frontier, but to Winifred, it represented everything she'd dreamed of when she left Boston. A chance to begin again, to shed the weight of expectation that had followed her since childhood. "Is this all you've brought, miss?" The stagecoach driver hefted her single trunk down from the roof, eyeing her with curiosity. "Yes, sir, I don't need much," Winifred replied, her voice soft but steady. "Could you direct me to Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house?" The driver pointed to a two-story white building at the far end of the street. "Right down there. Can't miss it." Winifred thanked him and began dragging her trunk along the rutted dirt road. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat beading along her hairline beneath her plain bonnet. She was acutely aware of the stares from the townsfolk, curious, assessing, already forming judgments. She'd come to Copper Creek to take up the position of schoolteacher, replacing the elderly Mrs. Abernathy who had finally succumbed to her persistent lung ailment 3 months prior. As she struggled with her trunk, a shadow fell across her path. Looking up, Winifred found herself staring at a woman dressed in an elaborately trimmed gown, her face powdered white beneath an ostentatious feathered hat. "You must be the new schoolmistress," the woman said, her voice dripping with the same manufactured sweetness Winifred had fled from in Boston. "I'm Vivian Hargrove. My husband owns the mercantile. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Hargrove. I'm Winifred Lawson." She extended her hand, which Vivian took with the tips of her fingers as if afraid Winifred might contaminate her. "Well, Miss Lawson, I must say we were expecting someone a bit more." Vivian's eyes swept over Winifred's plain dress and sensible boots, refined for our children's education. Before Winifred could respond, another voice cut through the tense moment. "Mrs. Hargrove, I reckon Miss Lawson here didn't come all this way to stand in the street getting baked like a loaf of bread." Winifred turned to see a man astride a chestnut stallion. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. The sleeves of his cotton shirt were rolled up, revealing forearms tanned and muscled from hard work. "Jackson Laramie, Mrs. Hargrove said with a tight smile. "I was merely welcoming our new schoolteacher." "Is that what you call it?" He dismounted in one fluid motion, tipping his hat to Winifred. "Madam, may I help you with your trunk?" "Thank you, Mr. Laramie, that's very kind." He lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Where to?" "Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house. Good woman, Mrs. Sullivan, makes the best apple pie this side of the Mississippi." He nodded toward Vivian Hargrove. "Madam," the dismissal was clear in his tone. Mrs. Hargrove's lips thinned. "We'll be seeing each other at the Ladies' Aid Society meeting tomorrow, Miss Lawson. Do try to wear something a bit more suitable." With that, she turned on her heel and swept away. "Don't mind Vivian," Jackson said as they walked. "She thinks Copper Creek's the Paris of Wyoming." Winifred couldn't help but smile. "And what do you think it is, Mr. Laramie?" "Home." The simplicity of his answer touched something in her. "And please call me Jack, everyone does." "Then you must call me Winifred or Winnie if you prefer." She rarely offered her diminutive, but something about his straightforward manner made her want to extend the small intimacy. "Winnie it is." He smiled, and Winifred felt a curious fluttering in her chest. "So what brings a Boston girl all the way out to Copper Creek?" She blinked in surprise. "How did you know I'm from Boston? Your accent gives you away. Not much, but it's there if a fella listens." "You have a good ear, Mr. Laramie Jack." They reached the boarding house, and Mrs. Sullivan, a round, rosy-cheeked woman in her 50s, welcomed Winifred with genuine warmth. While Mrs. Sullivan showed her to her room, Jack set the trunk down and tipped his hat. "I'll leave you to get settled. If you need anything, my ranch is just north of town. The bar L. Thank you for your kindness." "Weren't nothing." He turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Winnie. Don't let Vivian Hargrove tell you how to dress. Some folks around here might appreciate a woman who doesn't need feathers and frills to look pretty." With that, he was gone, leaving Winifred staring after him with a mixture of surprise and something dangerously close to hope. The next morning, Winifred rose early to prepare for her first day at the schoolhouse. She dressed carefully in her best dress, still simple by Copper Creek standards, but neat and proper for a schoolteacher. Mrs. Sullivan had provided her with a hearty breakfast and directions to the schoolhouse, a one-room building on the edge of town that served the children of both Copper Creek and the surrounding ranches. As she approached the whitewashed building, Winifred took a deep breath to steady her nerves. Teaching had always been her passion, but in Boston, her methods had been considered unconventional. She encouraged her students to think for themselves rather than simply recite facts, to explore the natural world around them, to question and discover. Such approaches had not been appreciated by the school board, who preferred rigid adherence to established curricula. Her reverie was broken by the sound of children's voices. About 20 students of varying ages were gathered in the yard, eyeing her with curiosity as she approached. Among the adults standing with them, she recognized Vivian Hargrove, who was flanked by two other women dressed in similarly elaborate attire. "Good morning," Winifred called cheerfully. "I'm Miss Lawson, your new teacher." The children murmured greetings, some shy, others bold. One little girl of about 6 approached Winifred directly, a wildflower clutched in her small hand. "I'm Emma, Miss Lawson. This is for you." She thrust the flower toward Winifred. "Thank you, Emma. It's beautiful." Winifred tucked the flower into her hair, much to Emma's delight. "Really, Miss Lawson?" Vivian Hargrove's voice cut through the moment. "Is that appropriate behavior for a teacher? Our children need discipline and structure, not frivolity." "I believe children learn best in an environment that nurtures both mind and spirit, Mrs. Hargrove," Winifred replied evenly. "Well, I never," one of Vivian's companions whispered loudly enough to be heard. "So simple in her thinking, no wonder she dresses like a Quaker." "Martha," the other woman added with a stage whisper, "they say she was let go from her position in Boston." Imagine what kind of teacher fails in a proper city school. Winifred felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she held her ground. "If you'll excuse us, ladies, it's time for class to begin." She rang the small bell that hung by the schoolhouse door. As the children filed in, she heard Vivian say, "The school board will be watching closely, Miss Lawson. We have standards in Copper Creek, despite our frontier location." Winifred spent the morning getting to know her students, assessing their knowledge and outlining her expectations. Most seemed eager to learn, though a few of the older boys were clearly testing her authority. By noon, when she dismissed them for the lunch hour, she felt cautiously optimistic. She was arranging books on shelves when a knock came at the open door. Jackson Laramie stood there, hat in hand, a basket over one arm. "Hope I'm not interrupting, Winnie." "Jack, not at all. What brings you to the schoolhouse?" He held up the basket. "Mrs. Sullivan mentioned you forgot your lunch. She asked if I'd drop it by since I was heading to town anyway." "That's very kind of both of you." She accepted the basket, painfully aware of how his presence seemed to fill the small schoolroom. "How's your first day going?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Well enough, I think. The children are wonderful. And the parents," Winifred hesitated. "Let's just say Mrs. Hargrove and her friends have made their expectations clear." Jack's expression darkened. "Don't let them bully you, Winnie. Vivian Hargrove thinks having money makes her the queen of Copper Creek. It's not just that. They think I'm simple, unsophisticated. And are you?" The question caught her off guard. I believe in simplicity, yes, in teaching and living. I don't need elaborate trappings to find joy or meaning." A slow smile spread across Jack's face, transforming his rugged features. "That's what I figured about you right off. No pretense." The children began returning from lunch, their curious eyes darting between their new teacher and the cowboy. "I should go," Jack said. "But Winnie, don't change a thing about yourself. This town needs more honesty, not less." As he left, Winifred felt a curious lightness in her chest, as if something tight had loosened. She turned back to her students with renewed confidence. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Winifred's days were filled with teaching, her evenings with lesson preparation and quiet conversations with Mrs. Sullivan. On Sundays, she attended the small church and endured the not-so-subtle scrutiny of Copper Creek's more fashionable ladies. To her surprise, she found unexpected allies. Mrs. Sullivan defended her fiercely to anyone who would listen. Dr. Patterson, the town physician, praised her methods after his daughter came home bursting with enthusiasm about their nature studies. And Jackson Laramie made a point of stopping by the schoolhouse at least once a week, sometimes bringing a book he thought she might enjoy or simply offering to walk her back to the boarding house. One Friday afternoon, as her students were filing out, Jack appeared with his usual easy grace. "I was wondering," he said once they were alone, "if you might like to join me for a ride tomorrow. There's a spot up in the foothills I thought you might appreciate." Winifred felt her pulse quicken. "I'd like that very much, though I should warn you I'm not much of a horsewoman. Don't worry. I've got a gentle mare that'll take good care of you." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I'll come by around 9 if that suits you." That night, Winifred barely slept, her mind filled with thoughts of Jack Laramie. There was something about him that called to her his straightforwardness, the quiet confidence with which he moved through the world, the kindness that seemed to radiate from him despite his rough exterior. The morning dawned clear and bright. Winifred dressed carefully in her riding skirt, one of the few concessions to fashion she had brought from Boston, and a simple blouse. Mrs. Sullivan helped her braid her hair, securing it with a ribbon. "He's a good man, Jack Laramie," Mrs. Sullivan said as she worked. "One of the best in these parts." "We're just friends," Winifred protested, though her flushed cheeks betrayed her. "Of course you are, dear." Mrs. Sullivan's knowing smile made Winifred blush deeper. Jack arrived precisely at 9, leading 2 horses, his chestnut stallion and a dappled gray mare. He helped Winifred mount with strong, steady hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. They rode out of town at an easy pace, Jack pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area's history. Winifred found herself laughing more than she had in years, captivated by his tales and the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of the land he loved. As they climbed higher into the foothills, the landscape opened up around them. Vast stretches of prairie gave way to rolling hills dotted with pines, and in the distance, the jagged peaks of mountains reached for the sky. "It's breathtaking," Winifred said as they paused to rest the horses. "This is my favorite view," Jack admitted. "Whenever things get too tangled down below, I come up here to sort them out." "What sort of tangles do you find yourself in, Jack Laramie?" she asked, genuinely curious about this man who seemed so at ease with himself. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "The usual kind, I suppose. Running a ranch isn't easy, especially these days with the big cattle companies moving in, trying to squeeze out smaller operations like mine. And then there's the loneliness." He glanced at her, then quickly away. "A man gets to thinking he might like a family, someone to share all this with." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had spoken aloud. They continued their ride, stopping by a clear mountain stream for the picnic lunch Jack had packed. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily from books they had read to dreams they harbored. Winifred found herself telling Jack about her childhood in Boston, how she had always felt out of step with the society her parents moved in. "I was supposed to marry well, host dinner parties, and concern myself with fashion and gossip," she confessed. "But all I ever wanted was to teach, to make a difference in children's lives." "And your parents?" Jack asked. "How did they take your decision to come west?" Winifred's smile faltered. "Not well. My father said if I insisted on throwing away my prospects, I shouldn't expect their support. We haven't spoken since I left." Jack reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "Their loss," he said simply. The touch of his calloused fingers against hers sent warmth spreading through Winifred's body. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "We should head back," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Storm's brewing." Winifred looked up to see dark clouds gathering on the horizon. They packed up quickly and mounted their horses, pushing the animals to a faster pace as the wind began to pick up. They were still a mile from town when the skies opened. Rain poured down in sheets, instantly soaking them to the skin. Lightning flashed, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that spooked Winifred's mare. The horse reared, and despite her best efforts, Winifred lost her grip and tumbled to the muddy ground. "Winnie," Jack was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" She took a mental inventory. "Just bruised, I think, and thoroughly embarrassed." Relief washed over his face, followed by a grin. "Nothing to be embarrassed about, that mare's usually steady as they come." He helped her to her feet, but when she tried to put weight on her right ankle, pain shot up her leg. "Oh, you're hurt." Without hesitation, Jack scooped her into his arms. "My place is closer than town. We'll wait out the storm there." Winifred wanted to protest, to insist she could ride, but the security of his arms around her was too comforting to resist. He settled her on his stallion, then mounted behind her, one arm holding her firmly against his chest while the other controlled the reins. Her mare followed obediently as they set off toward the Bar L Ranch. By the time they reached the ranch house, the storm was in full fury. Jack carried Winifred onto the covered porch, then through the door into a surprisingly cozy interior. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by bookcases filled to overflowing. Simple but sturdy furniture was arranged for comfort rather than show, and the wooden floors gleamed with care. He set her gently on a sofa near the cold fireplace. "Let me get a fire going, then I'll have a look at that ankle." As he busied himself with kindling and logs, Winifred took in her surroundings with growing surprise. The books on the shelves weren't the cheap dime novels she might have expected, but classics of literature, philosophy, and science. Paintings hung on the walls, not the garish prints often found in frontier homes, but landscapes of remarkable sensitivity. "This isn't what I expected," she admitted when Jack returned to her side. "No." There was amusement in his eyes. "What did you expect, Winnie?" "Animal hides and whiskey bottles?" "No, of course not. It's just, there's such thoughtfulness in everything." "Just because a man works with his hands doesn't mean his mind has to be idle." He knelt before her. "Now, let's see that ankle." His touch was gentle as he removed her muddy boot and rolled down her stocking to expose her swollen ankle. "Doesn't look broken, just a bad sprain. I'll wrap it for you, but you should stay off it for a day or two." He fetched clean bandages and a bowl of cool water, carefully washing away the mud before binding her ankle with practiced ease. "You've done this before," she observed. "When you work with horses, you learn a thing or two about sprains." He finished securing the bandage. "There. How does that feel?" "Better, thank you." She was acutely aware of his proximity, of the fact that they were alone in his home, both soaking wet from the rain. As if reading her thoughts, Jack stood. "I'll find you something dry to change into. The bedroom's through there." He nodded toward a door off the main room. "I'll change out here. Call when you're decent." He handed her a clean flannel shirt and a pair of drawstring trousers that would be comically large on her, but were better than her sodden clothing. In the bedroom, Winifred changed quickly, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs of Jack's clothing. His scent leather, pine, and something uniquely him enveloped her, bringing a flush to her cheeks. When she called out that she was ready, Jack returned, similarly changed into dry clothing. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her in his clothes, but he made no comment as he helped her back to the sofa. "The storm's not letting up," he said, glancing toward the window where rain lashed against the glass. "Looks like you're stuck with me for a while." "There are worse fates," Winifred replied, then blushed at her own boldness. Jack's smile was warm as he settled beside her. "Much worse," he agreed. They talked through the afternoon, the conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic. Jack told her about building his ranch from nothing, about the years of hard work that had gone into making the Bar L a success. Winifred shared stories of her students, her hopes for the school, her dreams of someday starting a lending library for the town. As evening fell, Jack prepared a simple but delicious meal of venison stew and biscuits. They ate by the fire, the storm still raging outside. "Thank you," Winifred said as Jack cleared their plates. "For everything. The ride, the rescue, dinner, my pleasure." He returned to sit beside her, closer than before. "I've enjoyed having you here, Winnie. The house feels different with you in it." "Different how? Like it's not just a house anymore, like it could be a home." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Winifred's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "Jack," she began, not sure what she wanted to say, only knowing she needed to say something. Before she could continue, he reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've never met anyone like you, Winnie. Most women out here are either trying too hard to be what they think a frontier wife should be, or they're like Vivian Hargrove, pretending they're still in some Eastern parlor." "And what am I?" she whispered. "Real, honest, you don't put on airs, don't try to be anything but what you are." His fingers traced the line of her jaw. "They mock you for your simplicity, but that's what I love most about you. Love." The word hung in the air between them, a declaration neither had expected. "You love me." Winifred's voice was barely audible over the crackling of the fire. Instead of answering, Jack leaned forward and kissed her. His lips were warm and sure against hers, his hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. Winifred responded with a fervor that surprised them both, her arms winding around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you struggling with your trunk on Main Street. I've wanted you to," she admitted, "though I didn't dare hope you would." "Why not?" she laughed softly. "Look at you, Jack. You're respected, successful. You could have any woman in Copper Creek." "I don't want any woman." His voice was serious now. "I want you, Winifred Lawson, just as you are." The storm eventually passed, but Winifred's ankle made the journey back to town impossible until morning. Jack insisted she take his bed while he slept on the sofa. Despite her protests, he was adamant. "Your reputation is important, especially as the town's teacher," he said. "When we ride back tomorrow, your virtue will be intact, Miss Lawson, I promise you that." His gallantry only made her love him more. The next morning, they returned to Copper Creek, Winifred riding side saddle on Jack's gentle mare while he walked beside her, leading the horse. He had wrapped her ankle again and fashioned a crude crutch to help her walk. Of course, their arrival caused quite a stir. By the time Jack delivered Winifred to the boarding house, tongues were wagging throughout the town. Mrs. Sullivan ushered her inside, clucking over her injury but clearly delighted by the development. "That man's been sweet on you from the start," she said as she helped Winifred change. "And don't you worry about the gossips. Anyone with eyes can see he's an honorable man. Not everyone was so understanding." Monday morning, Winifred hobbled to the schoolhouse on her crutch to find 3 members of the school board waiting for her: Mr. Hargrove, Judge Parker, and Reverend Williams. "Miss Lawson," Mr. Hargrove began without preamble, "it has come to our attention that you spent the night unchaperoned at Jackson Laramie's ranch." "I was injured in the storm, Mr. Hargrove. Mr. Laramie kindly offered shelter until it was safe to return to town." "Be that as it may, appearances must be maintained. Our children look to their teacher as a model of propriety." "Nothing improper occurred," Winifred stated firmly. "Mr. Laramie was a perfect gentleman." "Nevertheless," Judge Parker interjected, "we feel it would be best if you tendered your resignation." Winifred felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. "You're dismissing me for accepting help when I was injured. For showing a lack of judgment that calls into question your fitness as an educator," Mr. Hargrove corrected. "This is ridiculous," Winifred said, anger rising. "If I were a man, no one would question my fitness for seeking shelter in a storm." "But you are not a man, Miss Lawson," Reverend Williams said, his tone gentle but firm. "You are a young, unmarried woman entrusted with the moral education of our children." Winifred was about to argue further when the schoolhouse door burst open. Jack Laramie strode in, followed by Dr. Patterson and, surprisingly, Mrs. Sullivan. "What's going on here?" Jack demanded. Mr. Hargrove drew himself up. "This is school board business, Laramie. It doesn't concern you." "If you're planning to fire Miss Lawson over what happened Saturday, it very much concerns me," Jack countered. "Especially since I've just asked her to be my wife." Winifred's head snapped toward him, eyes wide with shock. They had declared their feelings, yes, but there had been no proposal. Jack met her gaze, a silent apology in his eyes before turning back to the board members. "I intended to do this proper-like, but it seems circumstances have forced my hand." Dr. Patterson stepped forward. As the one who examined Miss Lawson's ankle yesterday, I can attest that her injury was genuine and severe enough to warrant exactly the actions Mr. Laramie took. And I've known Jack Laramie for 15 years, Mrs. Sullivan added. There's not a more honorable man in this territory. If he says nothing improper occurred, you can take that to the bank. The school board members exchanged glances. If you and Miss Lawson are engaged to be married, Judge Parker said slowly, that does alter the situation. We are, Jack stated firmly, then looked to Winifred, uncertainty flickering in his eyes for the first time. Aren't we, Winnie? In that moment, Winifred knew she had a choice. She could deny the engagement, stand on principle, and likely lose both her position and the man she loved, or she could accept this unconventional proposal and fight for her future on different terms. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger. We are. Though I had hoped for a more romantic proposal, Mr. Laramie, the tension in Jack's shoulders eased, a smile breaking across his face. I'll make it up to you, Miss Lawson. Reverend Williams cleared his throat. Well, that changes matters considerably. However, the school board will need to discuss whether a married woman can continue as teacher. Many schools employ married teachers, Winifred pointed out, and until such time as we are married, I am still single and fully qualified for my position. She's right, Dr. Patterson said. And I, for one, would hate to lose the best teacher this town has ever had over such nonsense. After further discussion, the school board reluctantly agreed that Winifred could remain as teacher, at least until the wedding. They departed with much harumphing and meaningful glances, leaving Winifred alone with Jack. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I had no right to put you in that position. If you want to tell them the truth, Winifred silenced him by pressing her fingers to his lips. Did you mean what you said? About wanting me to be your wife, with all my heart. He took her hand in his. I was planning to court you proper, give you time to be sure, but seeing them try to take away everything you've worked for because of me, I couldn't stand by and let that happen. Then I accept your proposal, Jack Laramie. She smiled up at him. Though I do expect a more romantic version at some point, he laughed, pulling her into his arms. Yes, madam, how about tonight, dinner at the ranch, just the two of us? That sounds perfect. The engagement of Jackson Laramie and Winifred Lawson became the talk of Copper Creek. Some, like Vivian Hargrove and her circle, sniffed disapprovingly at the hasty arrangement. Others, who had come to respect both Jack's business acumen and Winifred's dedication to her students, offered genuine congratulations. True to his word, Jack proposed properly that night, kneeling before her with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. I'm not a complicated man, Winnie, he said as he slipped it onto her finger, but I promise to love you honestly and completely for all the days of my life. That's all I could ever want, she replied, tears of joy shimmering in her eyes. They set the wedding date for Christmas Eve, giving them 3 months to prepare. Winifred continued teaching, though the school board made it clear that her contract would end upon her marriage. She accepted this with outward grace while privately working with Dr. Patterson and other allies to change the policy for future teachers. Jack threw himself into preparing the ranch house for his bride, adding a second bedroom that could one day serve as a nursery, expanding the kitchen, and building bookshelves to accommodate Winifred's growing collection. Every few days, he would ride into town with some small gift for her wildflowers gathered from the hills, a book ordered from Denver, once even a kitten he'd rescued from a hollow log. So you won't be lonely when I'm out working the ranch, he explained as the tiny calico climbed onto Winifred's lap. For Winifred, these months were the happiest of her life. She found joy in her teaching, satisfaction in the growing respect of the townspeople, and deepest happiness in her relationship with Jack. Their evenings together were filled with conversation, laughter, and increasingly passionate embraces that tested Jack's gentlemanly restraint. Christmas Eve can't come soon enough, he murmured against her neck one night as they sat on the porch swing at Mrs. Sullivan's, the October moon hanging full and bright above them. Patience is a virtue, Mr. Laramie, she teased, even as her body hummed with anticipation of their wedding night. Never been much known for my virtue, he replied with a grin that sent heat spreading through her veins. As December approached, an unexpected letter arrived for Winifred. Her mother had written, having finally tracked her down through a mutual acquaintance in Boston. "She wants to reconcile," Winifred told Jack as they sat before the fire at the ranch. "She says father has been ill, that it's made him rethink many things, including his treatment of me." "What do you want to do?" Jack asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to forgive them, to have them be part of our lives, but another part remembers how easily they cast me aside. They're your family, Winnie. If you want to try to mend things, I'll support you. If you decide not to, I'll support that too." She leaned against him, grateful for his understanding. "I think I'll write back, tell them about you, about our wedding, invite them to come if they wish. The rest will be up to them." To Winifred's surprise, her parents arrived in Copper Creek a week before the wedding. Her father, Thomas Lawson, was indeed frailer than she remembered, leaning heavily on a cane. Her mother, Eleanor, seemed softer somehow, the rigid society matron replaced by a woman who embraced her daughter with genuine tears. "We were wrong," Thomas said simply during their first awkward dinner together at the boarding house. "Your mother helped me see that. A parent should support their child's happiness, not dictate it." Jack, whom Winifred had warned might face their disapproval, charmed them both with his straightforward manner and obvious devotion to their daughter. By the time he escorted them on a tour of the Bar L, Thomas was offering business advice and Eleanor was making plans to help furnish the newly expanded house. "Your young man is not what I expected," Eleanor admitted to Winifred as they prepared for bed that night, sharing the room at Mrs. Sullivan's that had been Winifred's home for months. "He's quite remarkable, actually." "Because he owns a successful ranch?" Winifred asked, a touch of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "No, dear, because when he looks at you, it's as if you're the only person in the world." "Your father never looked at me that way, even when we were young," Winifred's expression softened. "He loves me for exactly who I am, not for who he wishes I would be." "Then you're a fortunate woman, and I'm glad we came." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. "I only hope we can be part of your life going forward." "I'd like that, Mother." Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow that transformed Copper Creek into something from a fairy tale. The small church was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, candles glowing in every window. Despite the initial controversy surrounding their engagement, it seemed the entire town had turned out for the wedding. Even Vivian Hargrove, resplendent in a gown that must have cost more than Winifred earned in a year, offered stiff congratulations. "I suppose you've done well for yourself, Miss Lawson. Jackson Laramie is considered quite a catch." "Yes, he is," Winifred agreed with a serene smile, "though not for his ranch or his standing in the community, Mrs. Hargrove, for his heart." As her father walked her down the aisle toward Jack, who waited beside Reverend Williams in his Sunday best, Winifred felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The path that had led her to Copper Creek had not been easy, but it had brought her to exactly where she was meant to be. Jack's eyes never left hers as she approached, his expression a mixture of awe and joy that made her heart swell. When Thomas placed her hand in Jack's, the connection between them seemed to transcend the physical two souls recognizing their match. The ceremony was simple, the words ancient and profound. Winifred and Jack spoke their vows clearly, promises made not for show but from the depths of their hearts. When Reverend Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Jack's kiss was tender yet filled with promise, drawing good-natured cheers from the congregation. The celebration moved to the town hall, transformed with greenery and lanterns for the occasion. There was music from a local fiddle player, dancing, and a feast to which everyone had contributed. Winifred danced first with her husband, then her father, then Dr. Patterson and various other well-wishers, always finding her gaze drawn back to Jack as he moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations with easy grace. "You look happy, Mrs. Laramie," he said when he finally reclaimed her, pulling her close for another dance. "I am happy, Mr. Laramie." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." They slipped away as the celebration continued, riding through the moonlit night to the ranch, their home. Jack carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing as her skirts caught on the doorframe. Inside, the fire had been lit, and a bottle of champagne, a wedding gift from Judge Parker, waited on the table. But neither was interested in champagne just then. Jack's eyes darkened as he set Winifred on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. "I've been waiting a very long time for this moment," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So have I." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. "I love you, Jack. And I love you, Winnie, everything about you." Their first night together as husband and wife was a discovery of each other, tender and passionate by turns. Jack's hands, so capable with horses and ranch work, proved equally skilled at bringing pleasure. Winifred, who had approached her wedding night with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation, found herself swept away by sensations she had never imagined. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, the winter night cold beyond their warm cocoon, Jack pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what? For coming to Copper Creek, for being exactly who you are, for choosing me." "I think we chose each other," she replied, nestling closer to his warmth. Spring came to Wyoming with a riot of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. The Bar L thrived under Jack's management, and though Winifred had given up her official teaching position, she found new ways to contribute to the community. She started a small lending library in a corner of Dr. Patterson's waiting room, began a weekly reading circle for the women of the area, and occasionally substituted when the new teacher, a stern-faced man from Chicago who had replaced her, fell ill. In late March, Winifred confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks. She was expecting their first child. Jack's response was everything she could have hoped for, a mixture of joy, pride, and tender concern that manifested in his insistence that she rest more and let him handle the heavier chores. "I'm pregnant, Jack, not made of glass," she protested one afternoon as he took a bucket of feed from her hands. "Humor me," he said, dropping a kiss on her nose. "It's my job to take care of you both." The months passed in a blur of activity. Jack built a cradle from pine harvested on their land, lovingly sanding each piece until it was satin smooth. Winifred sewed tiny garments from soft flannel, each stitch a prayer for the child growing within her. Her parents sent a steady stream of packages from Boston, impractical baby clothes in the latest Eastern fashions, toys too delicate for frontier life, books on child rearing that made Winifred laugh at their rigid schedules and bizarre remedies. "Your mother means well," Jack said as they unpacked yet another crate of frilly infant gowns. "She does," Winifred agreed, holding up a christening dress encrusted with lace. "And some of this will be useful for special occasions. The rest we can share with families who need it more." Their daughter, Sarah Eleanor Laramie, arrived on a crisp October morning with Dr. Patterson in attendance and Mrs. Sullivan providing experienced support. After hours of labor, Winifred held her child for the first time, marveling at the perfect tiny features, the wisp of dark hair so like her father's. "She's beautiful," Jack whispered, his voice choked with emotion as he gazed down at his wife and daughter. "Just like her mother." "She has your hair," Winifred observed, tracing the curve of the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. "And your stubbornness, I think. She certainly took her time arriving." Jack laughed, the sound mingling with his tears of joy. "A Laramie through and through, then." Life settled into a new rhythm centered around Sarah's needs. Nights were often interrupted by her hungry cries, days filled with the thousand small tasks of caring for an infant. But Winifred found joy in every moment, a deeper happiness than she had ever known. Jack proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable cradling his daughter as he was breaking a wild horse. He sang to her in the evenings, old cowboy songs and lullabies remembered from his own childhood, his deep voice soothing her to sleep. On Sarah's first Christmas, the Lawsons came again from Boston, bearing more gifts and eager to see their granddaughter. The visit went more smoothly than either Winifred or Jack had anticipated. Thomas seemed genuinely interested in the ranch's operations, while Eleanor, to everyone's surprise, showed a practical side in her interactions with Sarah. "You've done well here," Thomas told Winifred on the eve of their departure. They stood on the porch, watching Jack demonstrate to Alina how he used a sling to carry Sarah while doing light chores. "I was wrong to doubt your choices." "Thank you, Father," Winifred said, touched by the admission. "That means a great deal to me. Your mother and I have been discussing it, and we'd like to set up a trust for Sarah, and any other children you might have." He held up a hand as Winifred began to protest. "I know you and Jack are doing fine on your own. Consider it our way of making amends and ensuring our grandchildren have every opportunity." Winifred thought of Jack's plans to expand the ranch, of the school building that desperately needed replacing, of the lending library that had already outgrown its corner in Dr. Patterson's office. "We would be honored," she said finally. "Thank you." As the years passed, the Bar L prospered, eventually becoming one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Sarah was joined by two brothers, Thomas Jackson and William Robert, and eventually a younger sister, Mary Elizabeth. Winifred's lending library evolved into Copper Creek's first public library, housed in a sturdy building funded jointly by the Laramies and the Lawsons. Copper Creek itself grew and changed. The railroad arrived in 1883, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Vivian Hargrove, ironically, became one of Winifred's closest friends after a scarlet fever epidemic forced them to work together to care for the town's children. The rigid social distinctions that had once seemed so important faded in the face of shared hardship and triumph. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jack surprised Winifred with a trip to Boston. "It's time the children saw where their mother comes from," he said as they packed. "Besides, I've never seen the ocean." The journey was long but filled with wonder for the children, who peppered their parents with endless questions. In Boston, they stayed with the Lawsons, whose grand house on Beacon Hill initially intimidated the young Laramies. "Were you really raised in this palace, Mama?" Sarah, now 9 and observant beyond her years, whispered as they climbed the imposing staircase. "I was," Winifred confirmed, "but I was never as happy here as I am at the Bar L." One afternoon, while the children were napping after a morning of sightseeing, Winifred found Jack in her father's library, examining a large globe. "Penny for your thoughts, Mr. Laramie," she said, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. He turned to face her, drawing her closer. At 40, Jack was more handsome than ever, silver threading through his dark hair, lines of laughter etched around his eyes. "I was just thinking about how different our lives might have been if you'd never come to Copper Creek. Miserable, I imagine," she smiled up at him. "I'd be married to some stuffy Boston businessman, hosting dreary dinner parties and dying of boredom. And I'd still be rattling around that ranch house alone, wondering why nothing ever felt complete." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch as gentle as it had been on their wedding night. "You saved me, Winnie." "We saved each other," she corrected. "And I wouldn't change a moment of it, not even Vivian Hargrove's disapproval or the school board's outdated policies." "No regrets, then?" His eyes searched hers, still seeking reassurance after all these years that she was truly content with the life they'd built. "Only one," she said solemnly. When his brow furrowed in concern, she continued with a mischievous smile, "That we wasted all those months before getting married. Think of all the kissing we could have been doing." Jack laughed, the rich sound filling the formal room with warmth. "Well, Mrs. Laramie, we have a lifetime to make up for it." And as his lips met hers, Winifred knew with absolute certainty that the path that had led her to Copper Creek, to this man who loved her simplicity above all else, had been the right one. In his arms, she had found not just a husband, but a partner who valued her mind, her heart, and her soul. Together, they had built a life filled with love, purpose, and the quiet joy that comes from being truly seen and accepted. In the years that followed, as their children grew and Copper Creek transformed from frontier town to established community, Winifred and Jack remained its beating heart, a testament to the power of love that sees beyond surface appearances to the essential truth of a person. And when newcomers remarked on Mrs. Laramie's simple ways, her lack of pretension despite her family's prosperity, Jack would smile that same slow smile that had first captured her heart and say, "That's what I love most about her."